Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be focusing on how to ace your interview to be a special educational needs teacher. We've got tons of great resources for this. We've got career guides, interview guides, and we're even going to touch on how RoleCatcher's AI can help give you a leg up.
Yeah. Today is all about going beyond just like kind of rote memorization of a bunch of answers, right? It's about understanding what those interviewers are actually looking for and making sure you're showing up authentically to the interview.
I love that. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of the interview questions, let's zoom out and just get a broad picture of what a special educational needs teacher actually does.
Yeah, for sure. Essentially, this role is all about working with students of all ages, right? Could be children, could be adults, could be young people who all have some sort of intellectual or physical disability. And your goal as the special educational needs teacher is to help them to live as independently as possible.
That sounds pretty rewarding. I was really struck by how, in all this material, it really emphasizes not just academics, but also these really critical life skills. Things like communication, mobility, and social integration.
For sure. I think what's so fascinating about this role, too, is that it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of approach, right? You're going to be tailoring every single lesson plan and kind of support resource to each individual student's needs.
That makes so much sense. So you're creating these really unique, individualized learning journeys, which must be so rewarding to see a student thrive. Okay, so we've got the inspiring part of it down, but our material was also pretty honest about the fact that there are going to be some emotional challenges in this job.
Totally. And it's important to be realistic about this going into an interview, right? This is a demanding job, and those interviewers are going to be looking for people who have resilience and empathy.
So that brings us to the core of this deep dive, which is those interview questions. And we've got a bunch of real questions from RoleCatcher's resources that we're going to go through.
Exactly. We're going to break down each question, talk about what the interviewer is really getting at, and then we'll even brainstorm some potential follow-up questions so you're super prepared for anything that they could throw at you. And remember, we're not giving you canned answers, right? We're helping you come up with your own genuine responses.
Okay, so let's jump into the first one, and this one is very common. Can you describe your experience working with students with diverse learning needs?
Yeah, I mean, this one seems pretty straightforward, but the interviewer is really trying to assess the depth and relevance of your experience, right? Have you worked with students who have different kinds of disabilities? What are some of the challenges that you've encountered in that work? And how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so it's not enough to just list off your credentials, right? You really need to demonstrate a deep understanding of the actual realities of what this role is going to be like.
100%. And you want to make sure that you're leaning into specific examples.
Right.
So instead of saying oh, I'm great with autistic children, talk about a specific student and the strategies that you used and what were the outcomes of that.
I love that. Okay, and I'm thinking some follow-up questions here that they might ask could be to elaborate on a challenge or to explain how you adapted your teaching methods.
Totally. Or they could ask how you collaborated with other professionals to support that student. So just always be prepared to kind of paint a full picture of your skills and your adaptability.
Love it. Honesty and genuine passion.
Yeah.
Those are going to shine through.
Yeah. And RoleCatcher specifically says, don't overstate your experience, right? You want to be authentic.
Love it. Okay, let's move on to question number 2. How do you differentiate instruction to meet the needs of students with special needs?
Yeah, this question is all about showing that you have a practical understanding of what differentiated instruction is. How do you assess a student's strengths and weaknesses, and what are the strategies that you're actually going to use to give them that individualized support?
Yeah, it's like you have a whole toolbox of techniques, right?
Yeah.
But I'm also imagining that the interviewer wants to see that you have a structured approach. This is how I figure out how I'm going to differentiate this lesson.
For sure. So you could even just walk through the process that you use when you're developing a differentiated lesson plan. So you could say something like, first, I would carefully assess each student's learning styles and their needs.
And then you would explain how you select the right strategies, the right materials, the right technology to support them.
Exactly. And don't forget to mention that it's an ongoing process, right? You're constantly monitoring progress, making adjustments as needed. So think about specific techniques that you use, like scaffolding or flexible grouping, or even incorporating different learning styles, and be ready to give concrete examples from your experience.
I love that. So avoid vague statements. Showcase your expertise. Okay, potential follow-up questions for this one.
Yeah, I think they might ask you to talk more in depth about a specific differentiation strategy or how you've adapted your teaching for different learning profiles. Like, how would you differentiate a lesson on fractions for a student with dyscalculia?
Okay, get specific. I like it. All right, question number 3. Can you describe how you collaborate with other professionals, such as speech therapists and occupational therapists, to support students with special needs?
Ooh, this one's so important, right? Because collaboration is key in this field. And your interviewers want to see that you really get that. So, how do you communicate with other professionals? How do you share information? How do you work together to create a really cohesive support system for each student?
Yeah, so we're talking about proactive communication, right? Regular meetings to talk about student progress, making sure everyone's on the same page about goals and interventions.
Exactly. And, it's always great to share an example of when you successfully collaborated with another professional. What was your role in that? What were your communication methods? And what was the impact on the student?
I remember when I was doing my teaching practicum, I had to collaborate with a speech therapist to help a student who had a stutter gain confidence in presenting to the class. And it was so rewarding to see them come out of their shell.
Such a great example. And be prepared for follow-up questions like what are some challenges that you faced in collaboration? How did you resolve conflicts? Did you make sure everyone's perspective was valued?
Okay, so navigating those interpersonal dynamics, very important. Anything else to keep in mind?
One thing RoleCatcher specifically says is don't criticize or speak negatively about past colleagues, even if there were challenges.
Great advice. Focus on the positive, right?
Hmm.
All right, moving on to question number 4. How do you incorporate assistive technology into your teaching to support students with special needs?
Yeah, so with this question, you get to show off your tech savvy a little bit. They want to see that you're familiar with and you feel comfortable using different assistive technologies to enhance learning and accessibility.
So we're talking about things like text-to-speech software, communication aids, visual timers, all sorts of things.
Exactly. And this is like a rapidly evolving field, so it's important to stay up to date on what's out there.
It is. It's not just about knowing what these technologies are. It's about being able to choose the right one for a particular student and integrate it thoughtfully into the lesson plan.
Yeah, so you could even give a specific scenario. Like you could say, okay, let's say I'm working with a student who struggles with writing. I might introduce them to speech to text software so that they can more easily express their ideas.
I love that. So you're showing them how the technology directly supports the learning objectives.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are some potential follow-up questions here?
I think they could ask you to compare and contrast different types of technology for a specific need, or ask how you stay current on the latest advancements. So maybe like, what are some websites you follow? What are some podcasts you listen to? Things like that.
Okay, so connecting the tech to real student needs and showing that you're up to date on the latest. That's great. Okay, and what does RoleCatcher say to avoid for this question?
Yeah, they basically just say avoid talking about technology generally without giving specific examples, right? Don't just name drop a bunch of different apps or software. Demonstrate that you deeply understand how these things work and the practical application for them in your classroom.
I love that. Okay, let's move on to question number 5. And this one shifts the focus a little bit. How do you work with families to support the learning and development of students with special needs?
Yeah, so this question really highlights how important families are to the educational journey of a child with special needs. And so the interviewer wants to see that you get that
Hmm.
you understand the value of involving families and how you can actually create that kind of collaborative, supportive environment.
It's a partnership, right? You're not just supporting the child, you're supporting the whole family unit.
Totally. So you want to start by kind of emphasizing your commitment to open communication, right? So do you schedule parent-teacher conferences regularly? Do you use email? Do you make phone calls? How do you stay connected with families?
You're also involving them in the educational process itself, right? So do you ask for their input when you're developing the IEP? Do you offer resources or support groups?
Exactly. And speaking of the IEP, that is, of course, the Individualized Education Program. And that's like a legally binding document that outlines the student's educational goals and the services that they're going to receive. So it's a really important document. And it can be really powerful to share a specific example of how you successfully partnered with a family.
I love that. So maybe you could talk about a time when you worked with a family to create a behavior plan that they could implement at home, or maybe how you helped them advocate for their child's needs at school.
Perfect. And then think about potential follow-up questions. They might ask how you communicate with families from diverse backgrounds, Or they might even ask how you handle disagreements about a student's needs.
Yeah, so being prepared to handle those more sensitive situations with empathy and grace is going to be important.
Mm.
Okay. What insights does RoleCatcher give us for this question?
They really highlight the importance of avoiding assumptions about families, right? Don't assume you know what their needs are or what their concerns are. So really conduct a thorough needs assessment and go into each new partnership with an open mind and a willingness to really listen to what they have to say.
So important. All right, I think we have time for one more question in this section. So let's go with, can you describe how you use behavior management strategies to support students with special needs?
Okay, so this is a really big one, right? And they want to see that you've got a proactive and positive approach to managing challenging behaviors. And I think it's important to emphasize that you really understand that behavior is communication. And so you're responding to challenging behaviors with empathy and support.
They're definitely looking for someone who can create a structured, supportive learning environment. And I'm imagining we definitely don't want to talk about punishment or any kind of authoritarian methods.
No, for sure. Focus on positive reinforcement, right? And individualized behavior plans. So start by describing what your philosophy of behavior management is.
Yeah.
So do you believe in preventative measures? Do you use reward systems? Things like that.
And then you can go into specific strategies that you've used in the past. So maybe an example could be like, okay, I worked with a student who would have frequent tantrums. So to help them anticipate transitions, we created a visual schedule. And then to reward positive behaviors, we used a token economy system.
Very specific, great example. And then they might ask about specific challenges that you faced, how you developed those behavior plans. Did you collaborate with families? Did you collaborate with other professionals? So just be ready to really get into the weeds on behavior management.
All right, so be prepared. Anything else that RoleCatcher highlights for this one?
They just say to make sure you're conducting a thorough assessment before you're making any assumptions about the student's behavior. Don't jump to conclusions, right? Really understand the root of what's going on and what's driving those actions.
I love that. And it all ties back to that individualized approach, right? So it's really the core of this job, it seems. Okay, so we've tackled quite a few interview questions in this section.
Yeah.
Before we move on, though, there's one thing I wanted to touch on, and that is the emotional toll that this kind of work can take.
Absolutely. And it's really important to acknowledge that because this work is so incredibly rewarding, but it is challenging. You will encounter difficult situations. You'll encounter setbacks. And there will be times when you just feel frustrated.
Totally. And, actually, one of the stories that I read in the career guide, I was really struck by this. It was about a teacher who was working with a student with severe autism who was nonverbal. And for months, they were trying all of these different communication methods, and nothing was working. And the teacher was just feeling completely defeated.
Yeah, and I remember that story too. And it was so powerful because there was this moment where the student finally made a breakthrough. Like they pointed to a picture card, and for the first time, the teacher understood what they needed. And so it's just this great reminder that even small victories can have such a huge impact.
That's such a powerful story. And it really highlights the importance of perseverance and resilience.
Exactly. You need to be able to celebrate those wins, you need to learn from those challenges, and you need to stay committed to your students' growth, even when it feels really hard.
I think that's so inspiring for anyone going into this field. You need to have that passion, you need to have that dedication, and you need to know that it's going to be challenging.
Totally. And speaking of thriving in your career, let's transition now to talking about what a career path actually looks like in this field.
I love that. I'm excited to dive into the career guide.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, so in the career guide, they actually lay out kind of a potential path that you can take, starting out as like an entry-level special educational needs teacher all the way up to a principal special educational needs teacher.
Wow. Okay, so there's room to grow. That's exciting.
Nice.
So what are some of the things that you would do like as you progress through your career in this field?
Yeah, well, I mean, starting out, you're probably going to be assisting a more senior teacher, like maybe you're helping them to create IEPs, those individualized education plans that we've been talking about. You might be providing support in the classroom, helping students with academics, and like working on those life skills.
Okay, so you're getting that hands-on experience, building a good foundation. What happens next?
As you gain more experience and expertise, you're going to start to take on more responsibilities, right? So you might move from assisting with IEPs to leading the development of those IEPs. You might start doing more assessments. You might be doing more specialized instruction. And the guide actually has some really cool example profiles of like real people who are in these different stages of their career.
Oh, I love that. So you can kind of see yourself in these different roles.
Yeah, exactly. Like you could be a senior special educational needs teacher leading a whole team of special ed professionals, or, maybe you're developing school-wide strategies for inclusion. Or maybe you're even advocating for inclusive education, like at a policy level.
Wow, so there's so many different directions that you could go. But let's be real for a second. What about the downsides, right? Because the guy did list some cons.
Totally. And it's important to acknowledge those, right? It does mention like the emotional demands of the job, potential for high stress. There could be a lot of paperwork. Sometimes you have to work long hours. And, there's a possibility that you'll encounter some difficult situations with parents or, maybe there's not enough resources at your school. So, yeah, there are definitely some downsides to consider.
For sure, for sure. Sounds like you really do need to have that resilience and empathy that we were talking about earlier to be able to like navigate those challenges.
Yeah, for sure. But, I do think for someone who's really passionate about making a difference, the rewards far outweigh those challenges.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so one thing that also stood out to me in the guide is that it really emphasizes how important it is to keep learning and growing even once you have the job, right? Like you've got to stay up to date on all the latest research, the new techniques and all that.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's great that they're upfront about that because this field is constantly changing. So yeah, the guide mentions like pursuing advanced degrees, getting different certifications, taking advantage of professional development opportunities. Like all of that is going to help you stay at the top of your game.
Okay, so it's about being a lifelong learner. I love that. Speaking of resources that can help you kind of level up in your career, we did want to touch on RoleCatcher, right?
Right.
Because it can really be a game changer for preparing for your interview and making sure that your answers are tailored to the specific job that you're applying for.
100%. So one of my favorite features is their CV and resume builder because it uses AI to analyze job descriptions and then suggest relevant keywords and skills that you might want to include.
Oh, okay, that's so cool. So it's like having a little secret weapon to make sure that your resume actually gets seen by a human, right? Because so many of these systems now are automated.
Exactly. And it just makes it so much easier for you to speak the language of the employer and to really highlight the qualifications that they're looking for. So, yeah, it definitely increases your chances of getting your resume in front of the right people.
Okay, so that's for like the application process itself. But then when it comes to the actual interview, does RoleCatcher have anything to help with that?
They do. And it's pretty awesome, actually. So they've got this huge library of practice interview questions. But here's the cool part. You can actually record yourself answering those questions, and their AI will give you feedback on your answers.
Oh, wow. That is cool.
Yeah, so it's kind of like having a personalized mock interview, but it's powered by AI.
I love that. So it's identifying your strengths, areas that you can improve.
Exactly. And it gives you feedback on like your clarity, are you concise, how impactful is your message, like all of those things that are important in an interview setting.
Yeah, I love that. So you can really practice and then go into the interview feeling confident and polished and prepared.
Totally. And, another great thing is that you can actually tailor your responses to specific job roles. So like you can upload the job description, you can have the AI analyze it, identify the keywords, and then it'll help you weave those into your answers in a way that feels natural and authentic.
Okay, so it's really helping you put your best foot forward.
Awesome. So just to recap, RoleCatcher can help you create a standout CV or resume. It gives you personalized feedback on your practice interviews, and it helps you tailor your responses to specific jobs.
And the best part is it's totally free. You can just sign up for an account and start using it today.
Yeah, so we'll definitely include a link to RoleCatcher in our show notes, as well as links to some of the other resources that we talked about today.
Oh, sure.
Okay, so we covered a lot of ground. We talked about what it takes to be a special educational needs teacher, the emotional challenges, the career path, and some really cool tools like RoleCatcher that can help you succeed. Yeah, phew, that was a lot. But I think we did a pretty good job of covering the most important stuff. And before we wrap up, I did want to kind of leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
So we've talked a lot about, the skills and the qualifications and all of those things that you need to be successful as a special educational needs teacher. But I think there's one thing that's equally important, and that's heart. you know?
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Like, you can have all of the technical expertise in the world, but without genuine passion and empathy and a belief in every learner's potential, I don't think you're really going to thrive in this role.
Yeah, totally. You can't teach heart. Right.
You really can't. And
Yeah.
that's something that will shine through in an interview no matter how much you prepare.
Yeah, it's more than just checking off a bunch of boxes, right?
Yeah.
You got to have that fire in your belly to really advocate for these students.
100%. And it's that passion that you're going to keep developing throughout your career. And we talked about the importance of continuous learning, but I want to emphasize that it's not just about like new techniques, right?
Yeah.
You also need to be thinking about your own emotional intelligence, empathy, and resilience.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. What does that look like in practice? Like, how can you develop that?
Yeah, great question. I mean, it could be something as simple as like taking time for reflective practice, or maybe you find a mentor who is a more experienced special educational needs teacher.
Hmm.
There are also a ton of great support networks out there.
Yeah.
Maybe even exploring mindfulness techniques to help manage the stress.
Yeah, it's like that idea of you can't pour from an empty cup, right? You have to take care of yourself so that you can take care of your students.
Exactly. And that kind of self-awareness, it's not only going to benefit you, but it's also going to create a more supportive, positive environment for your students.
I love that. It's all connected, right?
Totally. And I think it's important to remember that this deep dive that we've done today, this is just the beginning, right? We've given you some insights, some strategies, even talked about a cool new tool that can help you. But the real learning starts when you step into that classroom.
Absolutely. So we encourage everyone to go back and listen to this deep dive again, look at those resources that we talked about, check out RoleCatcher, and we'll make sure all those links are in the show notes for you.
And just remember, you've got this, right? Like, you have the passion, you have the drive, you can make a real difference in the lives of these students. So go rock that interview and then get out there and embrace all the rewards of being a special educational needs teacher.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, thanks for joining us for the deep dive, everyone.